So my name's Lisa. Again, I'm the digital marketing manager here at Range. Feel free to come inside after our panel, check out some magazines, and chill with us. So again, our panel today is called Action Outdoors. And the reason why we decided to have this panel was, because of the merge of SIA and Outdoor Retailer, we saw a really great opportunity to bring our sisters in the action sports world to come over on our stage and kind of tell us where they're at in their industry. Because, there's a lot of movement. Is this okay? Okay. We see a lot of different things going on in the outdoor industry with regards to the women's movement. Women are really owning their own narrative right now. And yeah, we thought we would check in and see how everything's going in the action sports world. So we've got Jenna Kuklinski, marketing manager from Nikita and Bonfire. We've got Ryan Rowe from Jan Collective. We've got Amanda Hankinson, who is a split border mountaineer and content creator. And then we've got Barrett Christie, head of women's product design and sports marketing at Mervyn. And I'll go ahead and have them introduce themselves as well.
Hi, my name's Ryan Rowe, and I specialize in public relations. I work with the PR agency Jam Collective, as well as the snowboard apparel brand Air Blaster.
I'm Jenna. Oh, gets loud right there. And in my job, I handle social media, team riders, team rider management, and just any kind of other marketing that comes up. Lots of hats to put on for that.
Hi, I'm Amanda Hankinson. I'm a content creator. I do a lot of photography and video work, and have been climbing mountains with my snowboard recently.
Is that one not working?
I'll take this one.
I'm Barrett Christie Cummins, and I've been in action sports since my early 20s, so over 25 years. And I work for Mervyn Manufacturing, GNU, LibTech, and I work on women's product development and sports marketing for all of our brands. And I'm proud that we have a women's component of GNU, LibTech, and Roxy Snowboards.
Awesome. Okay, so we're just going to get right into it. Like I said, we see a lot of movement in the outdoor space, for women, by women, doing a lot of things, right? So like women are, creating their own businesses, creating their own content and stuff like that. Can we just talk about where are we at with women in action sports when it comes to representation and where are we at in action sports? Because like I said, we know where we're at in outdoor, but where are we at in action sports? Do you feel represented? Do you feel like we have a far way to go, or what's the current status, or how could you sum up the current status of women in action sports today? It's kind of a big question, isn't it?
Maybe I could speak really quickly to some of the numbers. So, for example, in the ski industry, there's a little bit more of an equal balance of participation, men and women. But in snowboarding, I think we're still technically a minority in terms of participation. I think when you look at women who are specifically dedicated to the sport, I'm always surprised to find that, for example, for a lot of years at the snowboard magazines, the people who were actually subscribing, the women's numbers were more like 20%, and that was also kind of typical of the participation at snowboard camps. So you see kind of a mix between people who are really interested in the sport and perhaps would say, I surf, or I skate, or I snowboard, but they might not necessarily identify as, I'm a snowboarder, I'm a skateboarder, I'm a surfer. But at the same time, things have progressed so much since I began that I think we're on a good trajectory of increased representation.
I'm going to kind of pick up sort of where you were leading with that and just say, I work for Nikita Clothing, and it's girls only. It's a women's only brand, and we've really been able to kind of like start to pick up a lot lately, which I think kind of speaks to the momentum that started to kick up, that's been kind of getting rustled up. So I would say it's on the up, and it's growing, and people seem to be more interested in being involved, and also I think that it's starting to feel more accessible the more people that start to really be in it and be public about it.
Does this work now? Oh, yeah. Okay. So I agree. I think that the participation, and I don't know the numbers, I don't follow the statistics necessarily, but I know from being out there that there is a lot more women participating, but it's not just, maybe it's because it's not so much a lifestyle choice, it's just one of the many activities that we participate in, and it doesn't have to be exclusive to snowboarding, it doesn't have to be exclusive to skiing or surfing, but I think more and more younger girls are growing up participating in all of it, and you know, that's why a lot of our brands are getting into other spaces and just really embracing the entire action sports, which still feels funny to say action sports, because, I mean, really, aren't they all active? But I do feel like I have a younger daughter who's 8, and I work with a lot of athletes in their 20s, and you know, I've done this through my 40s now, and it does feel like snowboarding in particular is in a place where it's more accessible to all ages and more accessible to families and younger people.
And then I would guess, so from my experience, I worked for a snowboarding camp for the last 8 years, and I spent a lot of time trying to increase the amount of female representation, because while there's interest, there's a lot of interest, a lot of girls want to be involved, they want to sign up for camp, they want to come do it. The representation as far as media that's put out is really, really low. And so at one point I was scrolling through the feed of this camp and in Instagram, and it had been over 58 weeks since they had posted a photo of a woman snowboarding. And they often would get phone calls from parents asking if girls were allowed at this camp because they didn't see any photos of girls doing anything that had to do with the camp. And then most recently, just kind of as like, because I think things are really optimistic moving forward, especially with the women's movement, everything that, the momentum that we're carrying right now. But the actual current state is when I opened up the second issue of one of the most popular snowboarding magazines this year, besides 2 paid advertisements, there wasn't a single photo of a woman snowboarding and 145 pages of snowboarding journalism. And that's kind of where we're at. It's that there's a lot of girls where we want to snowboard, we want to go out and do it, but as far as the actual representation and what kind of support women who are at the top level are getting, it's extremely, extremely low compared to the men.
Yeah, thank you. That was great. So back to you know, like representation and campaigns and stuff like that. You know, like brand, you know, like marketing towards like women, like that's a thing, right? So for brands, like, should they be marketing just towards women? Like, do we need to be doing that, or what's your take on that?
I just have to say something about marketing, and that's that if you're going to be diligent in marketing and you're going to look at groups of people based on specific criteria, I think choosing women as one group is about as arbitrary as choosing men. I think that in general, it's probably an advantage to any brand to say, you know, okay, who are our consumers? Well, perhaps our consumers are young men who grew up with parents who were skiers, or they are young girls who are under 12 who also participate in these other sports. I think that there can be effective ways to market specifically to a female audience or to both audiences, but brands really lose out when they don't look at women and the diversity among women and the different kinds of participants who are female. And I mean, obviously we have people on the stage here who actually do market to women and do it really well, so I'm going to let them make their wonderful points.
Well, I mean, this is a good topic of conversation, and it's one that we have all the time, too. I mean, I work with GNU Snowboards, and we have, maybe I'm biased, but I think one of the strongest women's snowboard brands out there in terms of our athletes and our product line offering. And we don't run a isolated women's campaign because I feel like the snow knows no gender. I think I've heard that before. And we're all snowboarders. So, I mean, really, we're in it for the same reasons. We all like to be outdoors. We all like to participate. And we're not all elite level pros, but we all still engage in the activity, and it makes us all feel good. And so you try to tap into that experience when you're marketing towards men or women, and there's a lot of common ground there. But it does help to have women represented, because I know that I get inspired watching women snowboard and seeing what's possible. But I also get inspired watching women surf and skate, and I can't do either of those very well. But I get inspired watching the guys too. So I do think that there is dollars that needs to be put towards marketing women's product and marketing female athletes. But whether or not it needs to be a very specific women's campaign, if anyone's going to do that, I hope it's the women in the marketing department speaking, because it's hard to get that just right and not isolate the women.
So maybe it's a little bit more about leveling the playing field, versus just, focusing on the women. It doesn't have to be just about women. It's more about being on the same playing field as men, right? Do you agree? Maybe.
Yeah, on the same playing field. I would say, like, when I'm thinking about, like, how to put something out that's going to connect with the audience that I want to connect with, you recognize that they're female, but you also think about, okay, like, this is a female who enjoys skateboarding, or who enjoys snowboarding, or who enjoys being creative with their friends and doing something exciting and interesting with their friends. So inherently, it's going to be marketing towards women, but I think, Ryan, what you were saying, thinking about it as, like, okay, we're going to market towards women, it kind of really limits you and doesn't really identify the person, and it's definitely more a thing about, like, okay, it's going to be a female who is 13 to 17 who enjoys skateboarding. They're most likely in high school, so let's look at what kinds of things those people enjoy and then loop that all in and connect it.
I have to say one thing because Barrett's here, and I have to say this because I grew up snowboarding when Barrett was a pro snowboarder, and GNU ran an ad in the 90s, that's how old I am, that said, our best team rider is a girl. And it was a picture of Barrett doing a backflip, and it was so awesome for me as a young woman to see that kind of representation, that one, that she was considered to be one of their best team riders, that she was respected, that she was put out there as somebody who I could look up to. I literally had that advertisement on my wall in my bedroom for like 2 years, and then I think it went into a scrapbook somewhere. So for those of you who are marketing to women, I will say that particularly in traditionally non-female pursuits or whatever, places where women are not as high of participants as men, to see those role models can have a lasting impact, and I've appreciated GNU to this day for that ad. So
That's awesome. So we've talked a little bit about doing multiple things, not just snowboarding or skateboarding or skiing or something like that. So we're seeing a lot of content that's focused on, like, the lifestyle. Why do you think that is? Like, why do you think that more content is focused on showing the action sports culture and lifestyle versus just skiing, just snowboarding, or just skateboarding? Like, Instagram kind of sets it up in a way where you can show that you're an activist, that you care about, environmental change. So you're sharing that, with your fan base. So why are we seeing content show more of the lifestyle, not just the action sport? Right?
Well, I think the lifestyle really is why we all continue to do what we do, because the lifestyle is built around seeking out that moment when you're turning your snowboard or when you're surfing or when you finally drop in, like these peak moments that you have where you get this feeling that you can't find anything else that feels like that. And the lifestyle isn't necessarily dedicated just to the most extreme athlete or like the quadruple cork, which I respect anybody who can do something like that, but to make it more relatable, because in marketing especially, you want to make your brand relatable, you want to make the activity relatable. To save snowboarding, we need to make snowboarding relatable to people, and so publicizing a bunch of quadruple corks isn't really a way to do that, but the lifestyle of seeking out snow and being with your friends, that's much more applicable to people just in general. And that's something that it's very easy for brands to just have female representation, because if you have a photo of a bunch of people sitting around a table eating dinner because they're in Japan and everyone's having ramen on this epic powder trip, it doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man or who you are, you can sit at the table and you can eat the ramen. And so by focusing on lifestyle content, that's really what the sport's all about. It's the same thing as the outdoor industry. Like, you go on a hike, you don't have to be a ultra marathoner to do the hike the fastest that you can do. You go on the hike to enjoy yourself, and that's really what action sports are. You might end up in the hospital a little more frequently than if you go on a hike, but.
I wanted to say here, I think that also, like, your question here is almost like, it could almost be a little tricky, because I think that there's been a lot of times where women get put into the lifestyle only realm, and I think that from outdoors and kind of from what I've seen, the outdoor industry, it's maybe less extreme, so there is a lot of lifestyle and relatability, but I think that in action sports, it's really almost about coming more into having a balance between the two, where, like you're saying, like, people, you want to see like relatability, and you want to be able to look at that, and, like, you know, you don't have to do a quad cork, or you don't even have to, like, necessarily have that be the thing you're showing all the time. But I just wanted to interject and say that along with the lifestyle being shown as lifestyle, it's really key, I think, for women to have both, to have kind of like a 50-50 split almost of getting to see that, because there hasn't been as much of that represented. So.
I'll find something to say. I think marketing, like, I know for me, like, watching some of the athletes do things that I'm not capable of doing, I'm inspired because of who they are and because of their personality as much as their talent. I mean, watching somebody do a trick that's unachievable for me doesn't really draw me into the sport. Like watching a person who I know, does yoga and has suffered some challenges and has overcome those challenges and has, maybe had a challenging upbringing or introduction to the sport. And like, I like to know the story behind the rider and behind that, action setting. And so, I mean, I think the way, and it's hard to do. I mean, you have to have the dollars behind your marketing campaign to really tell that whole story. But thanks to social media, Instagram and Snapchat and all the other outlets now, like, I think it's important to tell the story of who those people are, and maybe they're fictitious characters that just found their way on an incredible journey to the snow. But I like to see that story, and I feel like that's relatable to women, and also gives a chance to highlight, athlete strengths or any of the product strengths that you want to market.
Speaking of product, I wanted to talk about the tools that are getting all of these people onto the mountain. Where are we at with, like snowboarding brands or action sports brands with regards to creating product for like a dynamic customer? Like where are we at today with product design? And, maybe Barrett, you could speak to that.
Well, I mean, we're in the hard goods business, so it doesn't cross over in lifestyle as much as outerwear and streetwear will. But I mean, I think that luckily I've been fortunate to be a part of GNU and Mervyn since those early ads, and I was one of the first women they put on the team and started to promote, and it was a good time in snowboarding where I was on an equal playing field and part of the team just like any of the guys that we had, but that timing was perfect because snowboarding was growing and I was given an opportunity to create a model that worked for me because there wasn't anything in the line that it was a good performance board and my size, and so that grew, and I do feel very fortunate to have taken that first step with a company that had, you know, the same philosophy and wanted to grow the product line and the offering, because you can't just throw a couple pink boards in the line and draw women in. It's like, you know, we might want a board for riding powder, and we might want one for going fast on the groomers, and we might want a small one and a big one, and so I feel lucky that I have the opportunity to create two board lines between Roxy and GNU, and we have 28 women's boards in the line, and you know, several LibTech boards also, and so I think we're one of the few brands that has done that, but it wasn't instant. It was over a long period of time, and you know, as we see the landscape change for snow sports in general, like, we follow suit with the women's product, and you know, and sometimes they don't sell, but we keep them anyway, and sometimes we have to make changes, but hopefully it'll keep growing.
The one thing I want to point out is that I think if you look in the space, the brands that are successful in the women's category, they have women who are participating in the creation of those products. You know, GNU is a great example, and Nikita, and you know, I work with Air Blaster, and that most people don't know, but Air Blaster is a husband and wife design team, and they operate their business in a way where they work in partnership together, and they both snowboard, and they both design, and they both test products. And I think having, whether it be your team riders or having people in your office who are female who can also participate in that process, ultimately makes better products.
And just to maybe play a little bit of devil's advocate to all of this, my personal experience as a 5'11" tall woman is that I normally don't fit into anything that is made for women at all. And so the last few years I've been riding for a company called Dinosaurs Will Die, and their product model is that a snowboard is a snowboard. And I'm coming to more terms with, I think that there are some aspects of snowboarding as far as different gear that you have that sometimes maybe a snowboard is a snowboard, and that it's more kind of if you take your riding style and your weight, that might be what dictates what size snowboard that you ride. And I'm not, like, I will completely admit that I need different snowboard pants than a man, because I have some hips and I've got some other things going on up here if I'm wearing bibs. And so I'm not saying that there's no need that everything can go gender neutral. That's not at all what I'm saying, but there are some aspects that I think it was important what you did to even create a snowboard that fit you, that you could ride, and that you could help bring other women in. That I think for some companies it could be, those were ways to help bring women in, but I think to take it from here as far as just having equal representation of the genders going on into the future, that really, because I had an experience at a board test event where we spent a week testing all of next year's snowboards, and it was an all mountain event, so it's naturally larger snowboards, and I haven't ridden a women's specific snowboard in over 4 years, and so when I showed up to this event, I was given my list of snowboards to test, and they were only women's snowboards. And I was like, well, okay, we'll see what's going on here. And so I proceeded to start riding these snowboards, and all of them were too small for me to be riding in that kind of terrain. But I'm a tall person, so I would understand that that's not all necessarily for me. And as I was going about it, it seemed that I couldn't hold an edge. I couldn't take off on the side hits. I was really starting to wonder if I had forgotten how to snowboard. And so on the third day of the event, I went and I grabbed a men's GNU board, and I took it for a spin, and it was the right size for me. And I was hitting the side hits just fine. I was holding all the carves that I wanted to. And I got down to the bottom, and I was like, all right, like, because the photographer for the event was there. And I was like, I'm going to get a photo on a men's board, and they're going to run that, and it's going to be this whole big deal. And he said, oh, no, we're shooting photos, so you got to put a girl's board on if we're going to do this. And so it was literally, I got smacked in the face with, oh, honey, no, that's for boys. Like, you can't ride that snowboard. That's for boys. You have to put on the girls' board that has less aggressive camber and is 3 centimeters smaller and has a smaller footprint. And that to me was a really impactful moment where I was told, like, no, you're a girl. You can't have the fun toy. And so I think that it's important to understand that females really are dynamic consumers, that we don't all, that if you make, it's not, the shrink it and pink it mentality doesn't fit. And there are some brands like GNU, it does have an amazing women's line, and the way that they represent women is something that I think all brands should strive for, but it has a lot more to do with equal representation and taking the input from the female riders instead of trying to fulfill a marketing need. So I know it's a long tangent,
Yeah.
but
No, that was
It's
a
a
great
good tangent.
story.
I agree, and there's a lot that we still need to do. I mean, every time we're in these meetings, it's like, well, what do we have from a 55 to, what do you ride, a 58 or 55? 54, 56. Okay, and there's not, I mean, we have a couple boards that are 55s in the women's line now, but every time we come to the table with a 58 or something, because I have a lot of friends up at Mount Baker who ride 58 plus, and they're not all tall girls. They just like to have a bigger board on their feet, and it's tough. I mean, we have a sales number that, you know, you try to make product that you're going to sell enough of, and yeah, I want you to know that I feel for you. But I also want you to know that those all-mountain board tests, they tell us to send the 51 to 53 range boards, and they give us the size range, or if I knew you were going to be there, I would have sent the 55s. But that is, I mean, and that's what most buyers go in with too. Like, well, our sweet spot is 48 to 50, and you know, this is where we're going to go deep, and then you end up with a pretty limited size range. And you know, I'd like to see more offerings and the bigger. I think powder shapes and all mountain boards and all mountain participation is becoming so much more popular that hopefully we'll see more products for that.
With that, pretty much just the more communication that happens between the girls that are doing it and the people who are creating it, the better it's going to be all around. Like the designer and that we have for Nikita, she's like constantly, she's almost like hounding me. Like I'm like, oh my God, I can't send her enough contacts, or I need to send her more, because she's always really trying to reach out and find out what girls want, what they think, what they're using. She's always like really thinking about it, and the feedback that we have been getting, while there are things like sales numbers, and you run into those kind of like door stops or those barriers where you're kind of like, oh, I can't make it past here right now. But they start to get talked about, and little by little things will get in there, or maybe it's a big change. But basically just having and working with females who are actively using the product and participating in it is the best way to develop it.
Yeah, and having, you know, a female in all, or like a female athlete in like all aspects of the business, right? So like creating or helping, you know, build the product and to create the content. I think, you know, having somebody that can speak to all of those things is like, you know, the best scenario, right? Cool. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about was, you know, how can we, you know, where are we at in action sports with creating and ensuring women in prominent places in action sports? candidates. So that's executives at different brands. Or what are we doing, or where are we at? How can we ensure that women are at those levels?
If you want to ensure that there are women at those levels, start your own company. I mean, I'm kind of joking, but I'm also very, very serious. So I do public relations with Jam Collective. It's a really wonderful PR agency started by Julie Atherton. And I have a job because she was gutsy one day and she said, I can do this. And she started a PR agency. I've actually thought about this one a lot, and I think that in addition to starting your own company, which not everybody wants to do, the other thing I would say is that for women who want to work in the industry, choose your partner well. Because if you're in a relationship with somebody who supports your career goals, then you have a good chance of making those career goals happen. And I would also say that supporting companies and politicians that support paid family leave is also a really good idea. Because for somebody to be at an executive level, they need to have a certain amount of experience. And sometimes in my experience, that can happen and coincide with also wanting to have a family. And I think that the future of families is that both people are working. And there's a lot of wonderful models of companies like Air Blaster, where there's a family, a mom and a dad who both go to work and who both take care of the kids. And finding ways for people to work and continue their careers and not have to stop and be able to have both if that's what they want is really important.
Yes, that was great. More for that, yeah. If you want it, say it, talk about it, encourage your friends. If you start to hear them sort of maybe throwing out an idea that kind of sounds like it, encourage them to go for it, because that, I think, is big. It's, yeah, it really is. I mean, I have to say that, I remember, each of the females that I saw in those roles, and I was like, this is possible. And every time, you reach out and you kind of encourage another person and you support each other, it's really about communicating and having people not be afraid to say that, this is something I want to do, and I think I'm good at, or not I think I'm good at this, I am good at this. Kind of getting rid of the I think. I try so hard to take that out of my statements, just just I am, or, just kind of get rid of the uncertainty, and just kind of make sure that there are people that you can see and you can relate to, and just encourage each other. That's big.
Thank you. Those are great. I was looking forward to that question. I don't have the answers to it, but I think that I know that I look up to women professionally, as I did and still do in snowboarding, and if you see people up there doing what is achievable, then it makes it more achievable for you. And so I guess associating yourself with brands and companies that believe in their women and nobody in action sports rolls in and expects to be handed a job, handed a sponsorship, handed anything. So we're all working towards achieving our own goals, and I think that there are so many women that have made really heavy impacts in snowboarding and in the world that I live in, and there's a lot of people to look up to, and I hope that I'm able to provide that for other people, but I have a long way to go. There's a lot to learn still, and I think that there's a lot of people to learn from, young and old, and I'm learning from the athletes I work with, because their determination and their strength and their sense of empowerment, and they do things for themselves, and they don't wait for somebody to tell them how to do it, and they're out there just achieving their goals daily. That's really inspiring, and so I try to look in all directions for inspiration, not just up.
Yeah, because I would say in action sports in general, in my experience, there's kind of one-offs of women in high places, and but it's definitely not the norm, and so we're still in the phase of trying to cultivate that sort of expectation to enter some kind of executive meeting and just expect to see an even number of men and women is not something that you do in action sports at all right now. And because even just before this, I was trying to count on my fingers how many women in that position in snowboarding I can think of, and I couldn't really fill up one hand with that. And so I would say that we're still kind of at a grassroots point, because I can remember when Jenna was first. Maybe she was living on the floor in my house, possibly, and she was starting to talk about pursuing this career, and I really think it's through the support of each other that you can start to rise up more. And in my experience, what I've done with photography and video work is the girls that I've worked with, we were not really doing much, but when we came together, we were able to build something and make it larger and make it visible and make what everyone was doing. We could bring it to the front of the stage and create a lot more opportunities. And what I think is the most powerful point to all this is that just to spread positivity. So if you are because it's really important to have those role models and to have people in high places to look at them and be like, oh, that is possible. It's possible to become an executive at that company, so you don't have to spend time getting inspired to get your act together and go do it. You can just go do it. And so I just hope that in the future we can continue to grow the number of women that are in high places in action sports, so then it just becomes a normal thing. And for the next generation of women coming up, they can just walk in and feel empowered without having to stoke themselves up before the meeting.
And I have to say, this is an area where men can help. Because I will say in my career, not only have I been inspired by the women who I've seen work ahead of me, but I've also been really so appreciative that I've worked with wonderful men who treated me with such respect and helped me learn how to be better at my job and gave me opportunities and were so fundamentally good. And it was those guys who really were game changers in my careers. So for all the guys who are here, who are like, what can I do? And for the women who are here who are like, what can I do? It's looking out for those who are coming up who are younger, who are coming up and helping them, and continuing to reach out to those who are more experienced and seeking their wisdom and helping each other.
Yes, thanks, ladies. And I'm super inspired by all four of you, and that's why we had you on this panel, and thank you so much. So one last question for you. What does the future of women in action sports look like in the next 1 to 3 years?
I'll just start talking. Well, that's tough because it's hard to look 1 to 3 years ahead of yourself.
Maybe 5, 10, whatever.
Okay, 5, whatever. I see a lot of the girls that are athletes or brand representatives in any way, shape, or form, taking their own brand into their own hands and creating their own content, and not waiting for a brand to develop a campaign around them to introduce who they are and how they connect to these products. They're doing that themselves, and I think that, there's a whole world that I'm not as tapped into. Content creation is great, and I can work with creators and develop stuff that works for us as a brand, but I think the really cool thing I'm seeing is a lot of the athletes just taking that into their own hands and developing their own content, knowing these are the brands they need to work with and these are the products they support, and presenting that content and having the opportunity to put that out in their own channels, but then in their sponsors' channels, or we all have relationships, media, and I don't know. I'm excited to see where that goes, because there's been films, there's been commercials, there's been you know, just individual webisodes and personality pieces. And I think that nobody can speak to their scene more than they can. And so I'd like to see more coming from within.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of piggyback on that because somebody that I'm really inspired by who's doing just that is Laura Haydar. She's been she was a very prominent female snowboarder and a few years ago kind of retired from it all. And it seems that she just couldn't really stay away because she started climbing the 14ers in Colorado. And so as a retired, unsponsored snowboarder, she's begun taking on this challenge. And she's kind of just doing it through her Instagram account. That's really the only way that people are getting updates about it. But it's been incredibly inspirational to watch this happen because she's a complete legend as far as women's street riding went. And now she's taking it to the backcountry in a really extreme manner. And that wouldn't really be possible through conventional types of media and movies and things like that. She kind of just stood up one day and she's like, I've got this crazy idea and I'm just going to tell people what I'm doing along the way and we'll see how this goes. And so I think, just women taking it more into their own hands. And then there's also this crop of girls coming up, like Haley Langland and Maddie Mastro. They just qualified for the Olympics. They're both 18, and they're just complete phenoms. And speaking with them, I feel like I'm quite a bit older than them, and I feel like I'm speaking to a peer. They're much more mature than I ever was at their age. And so I'm really excited to see what they want, because projects that I've talked to them about, what they want to participate in is kind of a deviation from the conventional path of a contest rider. And so I think that there's a lot of really unique things that are going to start coming out with the accessibility that everyone has a camera in their pocket, everyone has a channel in their pocket. Like, you don't need anyone to create your content. You can kind of just do it on your own.
Yeah, I see the stories of females being told a lot more moving forward. I mean, it's just that, like, people want to know about it. They want to hear about it. A lot more girls and females are taking that action on themselves. Like, you know, like you guys were saying, they're kind of being really proactive about it. So I see it continuing to kind of go in with the momentum. And then I hope is that it becomes more of a non-issue and it kind of starts to become one of those things where maybe like the younger, like the people who are the youngest generation in it are like, why are we even talking about this? Like, I don't even understand, like, this isn't an issue, you know, and the old people are like, oh, I remember men versus women, you know? Like, that would be great. That's what I hope for.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think we're out of time now. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us today. It was such a pleasure to have you here. And we'll see you at the next show. Thank you, everybody, for coming.